Hello, Cardstack community. My name is Chris C., founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Orchid's head of product, Travis Cannell, who is going to talk to us about privacy. And I think privacy is a topic that is in people's mind. You feel it every day. You have it, you don't have it, you have more of it, less of it. But there are elements of it that's more than just a feeling. There's actual infrastructure, there's actual rules that we need to follow, and there's actual, whether it's regulation or the anti-privacy aspects on some regulators about making sure that people stay in touch, but also the demand for freedom of not only the internet in general and Web3 as a movement in particular. Welcome, Travis.
Welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
So I'm really interested in diving into Orchid for a couple of reasons. One is that this is one of those protocols that in the beginning, it's earlier in the process, really inspire people with real use cases. There's a lot of promise for doing really, really big things with crypto, Web3 tokens, ERC20, whatever it might be. But in my own personal journey within the blockchain ecosystem side with Bitcoin and Ethereum, this was always something that I was like, that's a real one. And that's something that really is a concrete thing that of which the crypto part makes sense. And I'm sure we're going to talk about nano payments and probabilistic payment, but also the nature of the alignment between the ideals of Web3 and crypto and the continuation of the internet movement on freedom. So can you tell me a little bit about what brought you into this project, this space, and how would you describe the moment we're in right now, especially with a project that's been around for a long time?
Well, yeah, I mean, to go back, I like how you frame this as, Orchid being such an interesting idea, bring Web3 into to decentralize points of communication technology that tend to get centralized. Mm-hmm. And over these years, we've seen nothing but more centralization and more authoritarian regimes, going to internet kill switches and censorship to solve some of the problems that they come up with some of the policies that are undemocratic or unpopular. Mm-hmm. So it's been a real interesting journey, even just outside of the Web3 space, just following the narrative that has unfolded over this last 4 years around privacy and in particular around internet connectivity. And I think there's more awareness now of how important it is for people to be able to conduct business online freely and to transact freely, to access the open internet, to load the websites that they want to load. It's important for business, important for their all of their interest, how they get their information, and for their prosperity as a people.
Right. So it's the internet freedom depends on what part of the world you are. It's either something that, I have that, or we definitely don't have that, right? It is a very visceral thing. I'm sure is what it feels like in places where water is abundant and available in every tap, and water is it's a scarcity that is hard to come by. Are you seeing adoption of or the demand and yearning coming from places where freedom on the internet is rarest, or are you seeing adoption across the board?
So we see spikes of adoption that follow news trends. Mm. So as you would likely imagine, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out, we actually saw spikes in VPN, our VPN being downloaded from the Android store and used on both sides of that. Mm. Iran, obviously, in the huge revolution that started and started with a couple months ago and is still ongoing. We definitely saw a massive spike in usage there. That's a real interesting one for us. The U.S. State Department came out and kind of opened up their stance a little bit on the export embargo, mm-hmm. specifically for VPN usage.
Interesting.
Which is kind of what allowed us to be a little bit more comfortable helping people in Iran. And so we haven't gotten, it's kind of a cat and mouse game, so we still have a couple of issues. But we are seeing people trying to use it in Iran more and more. Like I'm saying, this kind of spike And it's also interesting in that we don't even really know how it's working, because the Play Store, like how these, it's sort of like these devices, these Android devices are reporting to Google that they're in Iran app. But, most people are sideloading our code, compiling it themselves and maybe distributing it a sneaker net rather than actually just downloading it from the Play Store,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
probably blocked.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of interesting. And then there's similar trends that we see in Burma, Myanmar,
Yeah.
a few other places, some in Africa, South America. But, when these uprisings happen, they tend to shut down, Western social media, like your Twitter, your Facebook. Those are the first to go down. And then people turn to VPNs to then try to report out what's happening.
So there is a kind of citizen journalism angle. There's keeping myself contextually aware and hooked into the happening sometime from outside, from inside, or people sharing outside. So that's the driver for adoption. Where are you seeing that they discover that? Obviously, a VPN sponsor 95% of the YouTubers that I watch. A VPN is big business in a Web2 sense. Are people seeking out a non-commercial VPN in their quest to connect after this event? Are they actually looking for the precise type, kind of outside of the trust me with the non-honeypot that I'm going to give you with a coupon code that you can refer back to your browsing history on Google? Do they know that? Are people aware of that?
I think, unfortunately, I have a handful of people that we're talking to, and we go out of our way to not understand if we're talking to a man or a woman, a older person or a younger person. We don't want to know what city they're in. We don't want any of their email or IP information, obviously. And so it's hard, I think, maybe, to fully know the answer to some of those questions. I mean, my gut would say that they're trying everything. And so they're trying to run their own VPN servers. They're trying to use the big Web2 ones. I think that they're crypto native and they're using crypto for all the right reasons. Like, you were kind of talking earlier about this, but with crypto, you're outside of the traditional systems as well. And if you're in the West, you're like, why do you need that? That's silly. I just use a bank.
Yeah.
And that, how does that work out with somebody that is protesting a regime in Iran? Not very well. They go after finances very quickly. Right. And so communication and finance is really two big levers that they like to pull to put pressure on their people. And so I think we're talking to people that are aware of Ethereum projects, and so they're interested in decentralized VPN. They think it might work better. Then so they're trying to use us. Sometimes they're encountering problems. It's like I said, it's a cat and mouse game. So we're trying to get feedback and see how it's being blocked, and then try to unblock it.
Yeah. So
we have varying degrees of success. I think our VPN product, to kind of compare it versus the Web2 world, the Web2 companies are incredibly financially motivated, obviously, and it's a very mature business. And it's kind of interesting. Everyone's seen that picture, which is very confusing, and the VPN companies have tested it a lot, right? It's the money picture. It's the pay $2 a month, but it's billed for 3 years annually,
Right.
Or pay $15 a month. And you're like, wait, why would I pay $15 a month? Oh no, I want $2 a month. Oh wait, you're going to bill me $200?
Right.
I'm going to buy 5 years of service, and they know you're going to forget about it. You're never really going to use it. It's kind of this really highly optimized software as a service model where people maybe get a little bit of usage out of it and then forget about it. And then you have a very few minority that are probably using, 90% of the bandwidth of the VPN because they're, have one account, but they are saturating it 24/7 downloading stuff.
Yeah.
So, so one big differentiator is that we don't do that. We don't try to take anybody's money up front. I mean, we want to make a trustless marketplace. And so, you can't have a trustless marketplace where one side is saying, give me $10 and trust me, I'll give you VPN service for a month.
Right.
In a decentralized world, your money's just going to be taken from you every time. You need to have some sort of way to protect yourself. And that's kind of why we came up with this idea of the nano payments. Yeah. Because what we wanted to do was just reduce, we just wanted it to be that so at any time you could stop, and this is more of a generalized solution for a marketplace, and that's why we call Orchid a bandwidth marketplace. But at any time, the buyer of bandwidth, which is the person getting the VPN benefit and running the VPN client, they can stop buying from the provider because they're not getting good service, and they can switch to a different provider. And likewise, if the seller they think that the buyer maybe doesn't have enough money or they don't like what's happening, they can stop trading as well. And there's no settlement that needs to happen. There's always the right amount of value that's being exchanged. And so those are a couple of the big differentiators. But what that also allows is a pay-as-you-go model. So the end user benefit is that you can start Orchid, you can create an Orchid account, which is kind of our own layer 2, layer 3. It's running on 9 blockchains now. And you can put in $1 of Matic on the Matic chain or on Polygon chain.
Yes.
And, you can start buying a VPN service for 6 cents a gigabyte and use it. And maybe, you can get your money back out of your account for the unused portion, but it's just a very cheap, easy way to kind of get in.
Yeah.
Start using a VPN service.
It's interesting that the pay-as-you-go thing, which was kind of what the long distance company was charging, like, 30 cents a minute, right? And then it became like unlimited, and then it became subscriptions, and then it's like the unbundling all over again. It is interesting to see that the subscription overload and the games of subscription is turning software more like licensing. It's like, buy it for 5 years and something like that. It's like, I thought the whole idea of pay as you go is to not prepay for something that looks like a license. But I also start seeing people kind of looking at, especially with the recent AI thing, to like, buy per token, like starting to look at like the utility pricing of processing as being like in the vernacular again. And again, developers always think about how much S3 storage am I buying, but most users have been thinking about these kind of like wallet shares or subscriptions, and people are sick of it, frankly.
Yeah, I think, one of our big kind of points of discussion internally and what we love about nano payments is that it could break us out of this model where, to pay for things, you have to have a subscription or you have to have ads.
Right.
It's very hard to, as an entrepreneur, if you make a website that becomes very popular, your server cost starts to go up, and it's not like you can just ask somebody who comes to your website and loads a bunch of images. Oh, like, hey, could you pay me, 10 micro pennies for the, what you just, to cover my server costs? Like, you just can't bill them back directly for the amount that they just charged you. So you have to come up with all these roundabout ways of making money. And if you don't do that, then you have to pay for it out of pocket. So it's like, and if you're the more successful your website becomes, the more problems you have as an entrepreneur to try to monetize and to then pay bills and then maybe pay yourself. Whereas, there could be new models unlocked with Web3 that are a little bit more trustless and, could allow smaller payments, change the business model up some.
Yeah. it's healthy to have a closer connection to what you're using and what you are consuming. I mean, gas cost while it's annoying in some ways, for people to think about a multi-chain version where you have to have multiple wallet with multiple local token is somewhat frustrating. And I know there are people who are solving that problem. That's really nice around the calm abstraction and these kind of like fun any chain wallet type of thing. But let's focus a little bit on the nano payment aspects of it. You guys kind of introduced, or as one of the people who pioneered this idea of probabilistic micropayment. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what does it mean by probabilistic? Maybe I get paid, maybe I don't get paid, or what actually is going on here?
You probably will get paid the right amount.
Probably get paid. Okay, I see.
But which is a bit of a joke. I mean, to step back, we basically really wanted to make a trustless marketplace for bandwidth. So we wanted to do a VPN, and we wanted to do it where we kind of ran into these trust issues where we wanted to make a trustless marketplace. And to reduce the friction, we needed a way to send really small payments. And there was a paper from the 90s called MicroPay. And so a lot of our ideas are tie back to that. And the question that they were trying to deal with back then is, how can I send somebody 5 cents? Well, I can, but a minimum credit card transaction fee is 25 cents. Yes. So it's a 500% fee. So it's like you kind of can't deal in the small, you go buy a piece of bubble gum at a store and they're like, sir, you're going to need to spend $10. Right. So, so micropayments have kind of always been this like, well, how would you do that? But anyway, this paper put forward a way, which is that you use probability. So rather than sending somebody $1, you send them a 1 out of 100 chance to get $100.
I see.
And so they kind of had this scheme to do that to avoid credit card transaction fees. And it didn't really take off. We, of course, took that idea and then applied it to the blockchain, to Ethereum specifically, and came up with this idea.
Where the fees are high as well.
Well, not when we started.
Okay, it was less than 30 cents, so you can still say I'm better than credit card, but certainly not. It's over that now today.
Yeah. So the general idea is that you take some money and you put it into an account. We call it an Orchid account. We have a dApp that allows you to do that, and it's kind of similar to a bridge, or it's bridging your funds into an L2 or an L3. That's kind of how we think about it. But so you take some money and you put it in your Orchid account, and then you're able to send these probabilistic payments to another party. And the payments essentially have an amount that you get if the user wins, and then the win rate, the probability of a winning ticket. So in the example I gave, it's a $100 payout, and the win rate is 1 over 100, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a 1% chance. So it's essentially like $1. Each one of these things you can think of as $1. Now, to your original point, am I paid or am I not paid?
Right.
Well, I mean, it's probability. So using the law of large numbers, like over time, if we trade over long enough period of time, then it will all even out, and the probability will sort of match the amount of money you're trying to send. But under short time scales and with really large payments, sometimes that can get a little bit tricky. So we typically like to have smaller payments that are kind of settled up more. So right now, I think how it works, I think a lot of accounts that we deal with on Orchid right now, just as a practical example, people are buying a $1 XDAI account and they put that into the app. And then they're buying bandwidth for 6 cents a gigabyte. And I think the face values of their payments are like 10 cents. So if you download about 2 gigabytes in the VPN, most likely you're going to see a payment, 1 or 2 payments go out.
Right.
So it's kind of roughly like if you download a gigabyte, you will send a 6 cent, kind of like a 6 to 10 cent payment. Some of those things kind of. Yeah, and those things are all adjustable, and the app is doing some optimizations based on gas fees and stuff. And then there's also some other optimizations that are happening. Of course, if you take the Nano payment system outside of the VPN, you can, it is open source and you can use it and adjust all those factors yourself. So,
right. So how does the metering of whether the service was delivered is captured? Obviously, you don't capture that online because capturing the actual core data detail record, right, CDR, which is how telephone company that is, costs more than the actual telephone call. That was one of those jokes, right? And they stopped doing that because it just cuts this humongous IT cost from the system. Marbell, rest in peace. So how does the network or the smart contract know of the actual consumed bandwidth on both sides?
Yeah, so
does it need to?
It doesn't need to, actually, because at any time, if you have the user, if you're not getting good service, if the service is slow, or you connect to a provider and it's not delivering, service for you, you can switch. And you've only sent a couple of micro pennies to them and a couple millipennies to them. So the idea is that there's no real guarantee, but also there's nothing up front that you need to pay.
Reducing the switching cost essentially get rid of that problem.
Right, exactly. So we reduce the switching cost, and I think another thing that's interesting about Nano payments is that as a general L2, L3 kind of payment solution, you compare it. Before we launched, we compared it to Raiden and the Lightning Network and some of these other payment channel approaches. And, those the interesting thing there is that the receiver has a setup cost because you basically need to, in order to receive like a Lightning payment, I think you need to open a channel with somebody. Whereas with Orchid, the user still does have to do something. The user has to create an Orchid account, but then they can send payments to anybody on the network, and that person, the receiver, doesn't have to do anything. So, somebody can start running a VPN server and register it on the Orchid network and then just start receiving payments. They don't have to incur any setup transaction fees. So it's kind of a one-to-many payment channel. We call it a probabilistic rollup because it's using probability sort of as settlement, if that makes sense, as opposed to rolling all the transactions up and submitting them using probability to have the right amount of value transferred over time. And
it does make sense because there's a little bit more fungibility in the unique sense of the metering and billing thing. That's a little bit different than a general purpose thing. And you're kind of taking advantage of that special quality of this type of marketplace payment to hey, how can I roll it up even more?
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. No, I think this technique can definitely really help with anything that has a metered usage. And obviously, in the Web3, I'm aware that something maybe like Live Peer is doing something similar with probabilistic micropayment. Are you aware of that? They're doing video encoding.
Yeah, they actually gave credit to Orchid.
Nice.
When they were working in a Medium post that said that they were inspired by the Orchid white paper. They didn't use any of our code, as far as I know, but. I'm not sure at that point we had even released code, but everyone's doing it a little bit differently. I think we have a version that's pretty flexible. I mean the use case that screams the ability for us to tap into this new possibility space is decentralized training on AI, right? Right now we are paying one company, right, for having done billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of training. And we say, this would never happen. No other people can run code to do training. Then I say, how many teraflops of GPU were we running in the proof of work Ethereum again? What if we do that again, right? To me, combining the reality of the GPU in use within the Ethereum proof of work era and the use case of training and the monetization of people wanting to use that on a per token basis, it's impossible to not see the model of a metered usage of a open, truly open, not in quotes open
AI training platform that is kind of like a marketplace with inference models small enough to fit on the M1 Mac. Like these are things that's gonna happen like in 3 months, right? So to me, it's like taking what the centralized entity is doing in OpenAI and say, hey, maybe we have some of the tools to actually do this at scale, and then people really want to pay for. So I'm just, when I saw this, not probabilistic payment, it's like truly decentralized AI is at the tip of my tongue. I can say I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Am I crazy here?
I mean, I'm certainly very intrigued with what's happening in the AI space and using ChatGPT more and more personally in ways that is sometimes a little scary with how good it is. Writing pseudocode, helping me a lot with my Linux commands that I.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, FFmpeg, right?
Yeah, and just like, hey, here's 3 different ways you could do it.
Right.
If it does that, and even if one of them it made up and it doesn't work, 2 of them do.
Yeah.
And I think seeing circulating Twitter today, all these people are Musk and some others are saying like, let's take a 6-month pause.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. I don't think that's possible, but I think it certainly captures sentiment right now. I think that people playing with these tools, you can really feel that. Now, to your point, is it good that a company, is running that? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Would it be better if it was decentralized? I haven't given that a whole lot of thought, but I think there'd be, like anything, some trade-offs there.
Oh, for sure.
I think it would really depend on how much we want to trust this sort of corporate organization model.
And, with the safety stuff, it seems to be adherent to policy. And that's, one way to ensure that bad outcome doesn't happen. I like the fact that airplanes are kind of safe, right? Like that's a nice thing to feel like there are regulations and standards for air traffic control and maintenance things, and airplanes are more safe despite Boeing's cost-cutting measure exposing what happens if you go too far capitalistic, but it's generally balanced very well. Is AI more like airplanes, or is AI more like access to water? I don't know, right? Like, but the safety aspect is definitely concerning, and certainly getting people to make their own airplanes, not fly their own airplanes, not civil aviation. It could be interesting, right? But then again, drones are kind of like that, right? Like people are making their own flying devices. So, and there's a lot to think about. But what I'm curious about the recent discussions in Capitol Hill about VPN as it pertains to accessing banned apps. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. I think people are sensing that you can do things that maybe the government doesn't want you to do, even in places where freedom is kind of assumed and kind of in the founding charter. What do you feel about that?
I just think it's a real shame that they're going to go after end users for that. It just doesn't seem right to go after end users for trying to circumvent those kinds of restrictions. I feel like all the things and problems that we see with the Great Firewall of China, they're just, not really taking the right lessons, from that. To counterbalance, of course, the State Department, like I was saying, just came out and was pro VPNs in, countries where, where they are trying, where rightly so, they're undemocratic, and there's stuff that looks terrible that is terrible that we're trying to help. There were people that are suffering, that are trying to get their stories out and trying to be heard and trying to get help and trying to access the open internet and get information. So, I think it's a strange evolution. I don't know if it's really, it's VPNs. It's not like it's a bill where they mention VPNs directly. It's more about that, that's an example of a way to circumvent their laws. And so
yes,
the kind of headlines that include VPN are sort of, it's like saying it's illegal to drive a car because you could do bad things with a car. So there's a little bit of some sensationalism that's going on in the headline there, trying to say that they're trying to ban VPNs, but they're really just trying to go after end users more and more, which is the more, I think, the bigger concerning thing. But
yeah, I think that technology is definitely not neutral. I'm not so naive to believe that, but it's a tool, and the tool, like, you know, the glove or the gun or the knife, is could be used for good things, but certainly some really bad things as well. And the regulation should be about the behavior and the consequences, and not necessarily the tool itself, or essentially sensationalized in that particular way. It's interesting to me to look at your distribution model as like primarily through the app stores and the Play Store. Can you tell me? This has just been something I'm a little curious. Like, there are certain people, like, you know, crypto people who are very freedom loving and want to build decentralized future that exclusively use iPhone. I gotta say, I'm one of them, and there's an irony in there. And I certainly understand the side loading of Android being a necessity in certain types of regime and country, and being a citizen of that country and a citizen of the internet that is a freedom device. What is your kind of sense of the Apple versus Android as it intersects with the decentralized like spirit, and then the practical thing of delivering that value to as many people as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, so I'll start with saying practically, you know, I have a big background in marketing. And so when I started at Orchid, we put together this massive spreadsheet to look at like each country and VPN usage and try to understand what's going on in the VPN world, the world kind of what's going on in the world according to VPNs, who's using them and why, and is crypto legal there? And, you know, iOS is not a worldwide thing. iOS is a Western thing. iOS is big in the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, you know, Western kind of European democracies, and Japan. That's it. There's no iOS really when you go to countries in Africa, or you go to Indonesia being the largest VPN market in the world. You know, iOS isn't really a thing. I think, you know, it's less than like 5% market penetration in some of those massive countries.
That's tiny. That's really small. That's less than McDonald's, right?
Android is the most popular operating system. It overtook Windows. And I don't see that sort of changing. I mean, you know, with all that said, like iOS, you know, I think there's certain practical trade-offs that we make. There's a reason why everyone in crypto, has an iOS device. Maybe they're better at security. And they care a little bit more about privacy. But it is a certain irony that you have to live with. You know, I think there's some other phones coming online that could be interesting to look at. I know a lot of people that use Linux on their laptops and things like that, and use other, you know, they have a privacy stack that's a little bit different. And maybe it's important to see how you could use your iOS device in a more private way. There's a lot of things that you can do there. But I think it's just one of those things that you have to make those trade-offs for yourself. It's kind of ease of use, what your friends are using, how weird do you really want to be?
Green or blue bubble type of situation. I mean, you know, the intersection of my life is obviously very, very iOS, and it's definitely there's definitely like a group thing in myopia that I'm not seeing in my network of people in Europe and whatever, not Japan. So Android is the major platform for the distribution for Orchid?
I mean, well,
is it most of your users using?
We do have a lot of, I mean, we're a US based company, and so we have a lot of US users, and we have a lot of users in Europe. But we've translated into 8 languages. So, but that's all, you know, most of that's all in Android. So that's just those are the cheaper phones too. I think that has a lot to do with it. You know, your entry level Android device is going to be 3 times cheaper than an iOS device. So, you know, maybe that's even less now. You know, I think Apple's probably doesn't really want to have to drop their pricing to enter the Indonesian phone market.
Not really. And I think,
Right.
Even when I say, oh, my friends have Androids, or well, they have like, flagship Android. The performance is totally not typical, right? So people, the Android people have, it really is difficult. I mean, I have to find like an old Nokia first time, like, and just keep it as a reminder of the reality of it. Um, do you see I mean, obviously, Orchid is a growing network, and you have these really concrete use cases. And from a market development point of view, there's certainly opportunity to just continue grow as this need emerges. It's a human need that's growing. Are there certain features using your existing distribution channel or existing programming network that you are thinking that you will expand to beyond VPN being a kind of like a product category, or are you very much focused on kind of filling out the VPN promise in more ways and the edge cases around them? Is this going to become more of a distribution for other type of privacy tech, or even beyond?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly operating. I mean, we're coming up with new ideas, and we are polishing our VPN, adding features, fixing bugs, getting it to work in oppressed places, like I said, and continuing to monitor those opportunities. And yeah, we are definitely looking at other things that are kind of along those same lines that we could, but no announcements right now.
Okay. No, I think it's really, really good to kind of focus on a need where if everybody has the ability to access information they need, then the innovation, whether that's tools or information, can actually grow. So there are something about, I like the Vitalik doesn't have a DApp, right? I like the fact that he's working on improving that infrastructure so that other people can innovate on top of it. And this is one foundational level. Despite your two being high on a layer, it's the internet freedom need is definitely one that is not guaranteed and is worth fighting for. This has been extremely awesome to get an insight on not only what kind of drove you guys to build what you want to build, but also the creative solution that is necessary to practically deliver the value of cryptocurrency in a non-imaginative way. It's so great to see this as a kind of a running concern in a business and a where people participating feel like they're getting a fair value return of their money. That's rare in Web3, and it's should be celebrated a lot more in the world that we are today. Are there any things that we didn't cover that you want to add?
No, I think this has been a great conversation, and we've covered a few different topics here. But happy to riff with you, and thanks a lot.
Absolutely, and as always, when we have this opportunity to speak with builders and on their journey, what we've always learned is that there are a lot of things that is motivating that is in common. Whether someone is working on finance solution, whether someone is working on privacy solution, or in software solution, or whatever it might be, and that's the part that is really uniting Web3. Web3 is not really about like cryptocurrency and tokens and smart contracts. Is really about spirit to say the web is awesome. It's the one thing that happened that showed us what the internet can be. And every day it seems like it can shrink unless we push the envelope, make it hopefully no smaller, but hopefully bigger, a way to contain the ambitions of every bit of regards we have. The world is flatter, but it is still uneven. And thank you for your continual work of continuing to flatten this world, and so that we can freely communicate with all the people that are joining this journey.
Yeah, love it. I'm a crypto punk myself, so let's fight against the oppression. And,
absolutely, wherever that is,
wherever that is, and let's let people explore freely the internet and access open information and judgments themselves. I mean, come to their own conclusions.
Absolutely. As always, thank you, our guest, for Travis, for your time, and I wish you the best of luck in it, and I expect that even though there's no additional announcement, that the people can follow you for new things, new releases. How do they follow the Orchid project?
Twitter is our biggest platform. It's at Orchid Protocol, and we a lot of privacy kind of topics, and then of course put out any big announcements. talk about things that we've been working on, things that are important to us, and try to jump into conversations as well. So Orchid Protocol on Twitter, that's going to be the best place.
And please go download the application. It's awesome. And as always with the community, thank you for your time and attention. Until next time, take care.